This podcast has been produced in partnership between Diverse Learners and the Workforce Disability Equality Standard team to explore the lived experiences of disabled staff working in the NHS. Hello everybody, this is another podcast in our series A Conversation With, where we talk to NHS staff who have a lived experience of disability, and they are going to share that with you today. And this is a partnership project between Diverse Learners and the Workforce Disability Equality Standard, Weddis, and we've been recording this during COVID as well. So please be aware that we may be at home and you may hear a delivery, or you may hear animals or children, for example. So that's what real life is for many of us at the moment. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to, or actually allow them to introduce themselves, introduce you to Ian. Could you tell us, Ian, who you are, what your job in the NHS is, and how you describe your disability?
Hi, Kerry. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I'm Ian Jeffries. So I'm officially Head of HR Business Partnering and Employee Relations at South East Coast Ambulance Service. It's a senior management position within human resources, but I'm currently on alternative duties as a lead for what's referred to as HR specialist projects, HR strategic projects. So I lead on strategic initiatives in support of the wider HR agenda, such as retention, the NHS People Plan, executive remuneration and stuff like that. So all really exciting stuff I get to do, but not within a defined remit. In terms of my disability, or disabilities in my case, I describe them as complex. I've got multiple health issues ranging from degenerative disc disease and spinal stenosis to a rare autoimmune disease, which is manifested as Addison's disease and Hashimoto's and type 1 diabetes. And I also suffer from mental health issues as well. So I have OCD, obsessional compulsive disorder, depression and anxiety, which I've had for most of my kind of adult life.
Thank you for sharing that, Ian. I really appreciate that. And is that why you've got alternative duties at the moment? Because of your disabilities, I should say. Well, assume which one.
Yeah, no, yes, very much so, very much the case. And because my rare disease side of stuff has only kind of manifested in the last year and a half, that's kind of while I'm undergoing treatment and testing and what have you, the alternative duties has gone on probably a little bit longer than it would normally.
Okay, thank you very much. So what are your experiences of working in the NHS, Ian?
Yeah, I'm pleased to say, in the main, very, very positive. I've never hidden my physical or my mental health from my employers. And as I mentioned a little while ago, the rare disease was only kind of recently diagnosed. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of October 2019, which was kind of 2 years into my employment. I'd been hospitalised kind of 6 or 7 times throughout 2019. And it wasn't until I was kind of very seriously ill in intensive care, so intensive care, that I got the diagnosis. I'd say that throughout that time, particularly my HR director and my CEO, who I worked very closely with, were absolutely amazing, including the colleagues within my senior management team. Everyone was really worried about me. As part of my head of HR business partnering role, I worked very closely with the unions, and quite a few of the senior union reps were also clinicians. So they've been kind of following my journey with me. I think they were as keen to get a diagnosis as I was. And whilst I was in hospital, I actually had my HR director come and visit me. Just happened to come on a day where I really wasn't very good. And when they left, I was in a much better place. And for me, it kind of takes a really special boss, a really special line manager, whatever the phrase that you want to use, to come visit you in hospital and cheer you up. And I'd say as well that despite my best efforts, my disability does impact on my ability to do my job. Everything from the kind of pain and pain management, some of the drugs that I'm on are particularly strong, or strong for me anyway, things like codeine and tramadol. And then the autoimmune disease just leaves me really fatigued and really extremes of tiredness, hence why I've got bags under my eyes today. As well, I get low blood pressure and low blood glucose. So that can kind of lead to irritability, and then that fires up the depression. And then on top, you've got the everyday challenges of battling mental health. So it's kind of, it's incredibly challenging at times. But like many people listening to the podcast, I've got no choice. I have to work. I've got bills to pay and a wife and children to support. So, I have to do what I have to do. But I feel quite often with my disability that I have to compensate for everything that's wrong with me. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll try and expand on that. But
yes, that's a common thing that's actually cropped up in these podcasts, Ian. So please feel free to explore that.
Thanks, because it's difficult when you're exploring these things that you never want to say the wrong thing, but I have to be me at the same time. I always feel that I have to do a better job than everybody else, that the focus on me has to be positive and not negative. I always feel like I have to go the extra mile all the time, so more research, more detail, more effort, more energy than my colleagues are putting in. I double check everything to make sure that I don't submit errors in anything that I do. My colleagues, the people that I work with every day, are amazing. They're excellent. So it actually makes it even harder than it sounds to try and be better or appear better than them. But so far, all of the feedback I've had has suggested that I'm doing an excellent job. But behind the confident smile that everyone gets to see is a really physically and mentally exhausted individual. And me, I literally collapse into bed at 8 o'clock every evening, and I've got nothing left to offer anybody. My children, my partner. It's not really something one can sustainably do every day, and it's exacerbated really by the pandemic as well.
Absolutely, and this is something that I talk about with clients all the time, and as I come up on the podcast, this idea of fatigue and exhaustion. And sometimes that's why we, as a disabled person myself and as a mother of two disabled people, that's sometimes why we get poorly, is because we're putting so much energy in and so much efforts. That's a story we hear really regularly, and I really thank you for saying that, because often I think it's overlooked. They go, wow, this person's inspirational and they're amazing and they're doing a great job, but there's sometimes the cost of that is potentially too great, would you say?
Yes, sometimes, most definitely. I get to the weekends and like most people, I know NHS, we work 24/7 as an organisation, but I'm lucky enough to do Monday to Friday. But I get to Friday, and actually Saturday for me is about recovery, and Sunday is about preparation for the following week. And so it's a perpetual cycle. But at the same time, from the kind of mental health perspective with the pandemic, I miss the structure at the weekends. Monday to Friday, I know I have to be at my desk for 8:30, or my kitchen table, as is the case, not a desk, but I have to be here at 8:30, work till most evenings, 5:30, 6 o'clock. I have that structure. I get to the weekends, and being clinically extremely vulnerable with all that I've got, I can't leave the house. Lately it's been snowing and raining, so even if I wanted to walk, the kind of structure hasn't, or the lack of a structure has an impact as well.
So would that be something that would be a reasonable adjustment to put in, to have the routine, to have the structure?
Yeah, I think it's going to be different for different people and depending on what their disabilities are. But for me, the structure brings some calmness to the OCD. I was concerned doing this podcast, some of my routines and how I manage my OCD would manifest, but actually our introduction, the way that we're doing this is kind of left me calm and relaxed, because I feel there's a structure to it and I want to take part, and that helps keep me calm and controlled. At the weekends it's much more challenging. So yeah, I would see that as a good, a reasonable adjustment in some instances.
And there's my doorbell going and my dog barking, so showing that we're both working from home at the moment.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I put a tweet out about this actually this weekend. And so my tweet name is @diverselearners, all one name, and I actually put up that it was a recuperation. We call them recuperation weekends. We don't call them lazy weekends because, again, it's got that negative connotation when actually it's the opposite of being lazy. It's the exhaustion. So we call them recuperation weekends. And I spent all day in bed on Saturday. On Sunday, I had breakfast in elevensies in bed. I did a bit of work. I've actually done a paper called, well, I see this is where my dyspraxia comes in. I know roughly what it's called, but I can't remember its exact name. But it's along the lines of using your bed as a workspace as a person with a disability. And actually, I think that can be hidden. It can be masked from our colleagues. So it's great that you're actually talking about that, because obviously you've told all your colleagues or just some of your colleagues at work?
Yeah, I would say whilst I do try and encourage people to be open about what's, particularly about their disabilities, but just what's going on in their world, because we try to help people. I am a little bit selective to start with. I need to feel that there's that trust relationship first of all, but sometimes I'm prepared to take the gamble. I feel like doing this podcast as a senior manager within the NHS feels a bit of a gamble. It shouldn't feel that way, but I think exposing my disabilities and how it impacts me is key to making sure that I get the support that I need. But at the same time, it's amazing the number of people that I've spoken to openly about mental health, really put myself in a vulnerable position to talk about it, and then suddenly other people open up as well, and all of a sudden I've created this environment where it's safe to talk about mental health, it's safe to talk about disability. So sometimes those bold steps have really massive positive repercussions.
And shows leadership, and it shows compassion, which is 150 leaders in the NHS. These are the key qualities that we're looking for in our employees. For me, it was very exciting that you came to us through the Workforce Disability Equality Standards survey, where you tick the box to say, oh, I'm interested in doing some more. When we got together with Weddis, we said, well, actually, why don't we use that, as you provide some people for the podcast and we'll provide some people for the podcast, get different diverse views. So we were very excited because, leadership is so important in the NHS, and it's talked about, and actually having those conversations and having yourself as a senior leader say, do you know what, it's okay that what I'm managing, I might need to ask you for a bit of support. We might have to do things a little bit differently. Is so important for modelling that safer culture within the NHS. So I really thank you for that. So I think it's important just to have a question about Weddis. So tell us what you know about the Workforce Disability Equality Standard.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but as part of the senior HR team, I work closely with wellbeing and inclusion, including having an action or two to deliver within it. We have a combined res and des, we refer to it as the workforce race equality and the workforce disability equality. So we have that joint action plan that we deliver through our inclusion working group, and that's chaired by our chief exec and covers things like gender pay, race and disability as well. So I, particularly when I'm doing an update on the actions that have been assigned to me, I'll go along to that, and then our inclusion team will quite regularly present their updates to us as a HR senior team as well, so get engaged through that as well. We've got our networks as well. They play a really key part in the overall res and des plan. So they're the kind of the voices of the people, and they influence the plan. What else have I done with that? So I attend the networks myself, particularly our disability and carers network. So I have some part to play in influencing that. But that's kind of my introduction to that at the moment. So still quite, even 3 years into the NHS, I'm probably not as close to it as I should be as a disabled colleague. I'm hoping to get even closer to it, but being on alternate duties, I've probably not got quite as involved as I did under my main remit.
Thank you. So can I ask you then what your experience is of how initiatives like Access to Work have helped put reasonable adjustments in place to ensure you're not disadvantaged at work? And you can wear multiple hats here, Ian, if you need, where it's like, this is what's happened for me and this is what I know with my HR job.
Yeah, so I've tried to do this this podcast as Ian Jeffries the person rather than Ian Jeffries the HR professional. But there is a crossover. So I myself have benefited from Access to Work, pretty much in a previous role, not within the NHS, but I had a significant grant to help with the purchase of specialist equipment. So I had a adjustable high back ergonomic chair, a footrest, some speech software, a screen magnifier, etc. So they funded that for me as well. But since I've been in the NHS, I haven't seen the NHS take advantage, or certainly the ambulance trust that I'm in, take advantage of Access to Work. NHS have always funded whatever I needed, and I think there's sometimes a mentality of using one government funded body to fund another government body. I think there's some crossover there, but Access to Work, I think, offers so much more than just financial grants. It's the support, it's advice on equipment. They even offer training for managers as well, and I think we need to take a bit more of a bold step here with utilising that service. We shouldn't worry about the fact we're one government funded body. This is another service, and if it aids our people, if it makes a difference to me, and it does, then let's do it.
Excellent. So that's really interesting, because we actually at Diverse Learners provide that support for managers, the awareness training for managers, as well as the workplace coping strategies training that is often a one-to-one support for people in the NHS, so they become more efficient and effective and don't get so fatigued, and looked at reasonable ways of, we like to call it access rights rather than reasonable adjustments, but in order to access their needs and their job. And it's not well known that all of that is funded at nil cost, so it is reimbursed or reclaimed from Access to Work. And at these times, I know a number of things that have come up through these podcasts is that people were worried about the costs. I don't want to be a drain on the NHS, and should I be having this? But actually, as you say, that costs can be reclaimed from the Department of Work and Pensions, who run Access to Work. So that's great to hear you say that. And it's something we're trying to raise awareness of as well. So based on your experiences and insights as Ian, and as an HR manager, because as you say, there is a bit of an overlap because you have that knowledge, what advice would you offer to people who have disabilities and managers in the NHS for that greater inclusiveness we've talked about and removing those barriers?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One, I think to my fellow disabled colleagues, I'd say be as open as you can, particularly with your line manager. Within the NHS, we're in the business of caring for people, and I think the more we know, the more we can do to help. I recognise it's a challenge sometimes, and people are fearful of reprisals, but I would try to encourage you to be as open as you can. I think for me, my message is always be proud of who you are and what you've achieved and the hurdles that you've overcome. I see the disability as part of me, but I am not my disability. So I think that's quite key. I think if you're struggling with anything to do with, be it mental health, physical, tell your manager or talk to somebody that you trust, please. For me, I carried around all of this for years without telling anybody, and the relief when actually I was able to get somebody else to understand what was going on with me was huge. Yet I wouldn't pretend that it was easy, and there were certainly some struggles with some people understanding, but it was a huge thing for me to talk about it. I think for managers, I'd say invite your staff to be open and honest with you. You have to give them that safety and security that will bring out the best in them, both both as workers and as human beings. You don't need to be an expert in the disability itself, or even fully understand the implications it's going to have on work. You just have to be open to listening, and then you can talk to other experts such as human resources, such as well-being, occupational health. Union reps are amazing. They've got a whole arsenal of support they can provide you. If you've got networks within your trust like we have, they're all there willingly wanting to help as best as they can. I'd also say for managers that you need to be patient and you need to ask after us, because every day has its challenges, and sometimes we don't understand what's going on in our bodies or why we're feeling the way we do on a certain day, let alone trying to explain that to somebody else. I'm very lucky that if I say to my boss that I'm not having a great day because of my disability, but I can't put my finger on exactly what's wrong, his response is always, Ian, listen to your body, and if it's telling you to stop, then stop. I'd rather lose you for a few hours than you overdo it, fall really ill and be off for a week. And he always ends with, check back in with me tomorrow, let me know how you're doing. And it's because of that approach and that style of leadership that I often go above and beyond and exceed his expectations, because he supports me and because he values me. And I think you'll find a lot of managers within the NHS will be the same, where when we're not in this for the money, there's bigger money out there if that's what we're driven. We've come into the care sector because we want to make a difference. I make a difference to patients by the way I look after and treat the staff. That's my contribution.
Wow, that's a great phrase at the end, and I love that. So I think that would be a really nice place to wrap up and leave people with that. I might even put it on your little header of the podcast. That's a brilliant message on so many levels, Ian. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Keep safe, and thanks for everything you're doing. And you never know, we might actually meet in person one day.
I look forward to that.
Okay then, Ian, thanks very much.
Thanks, Kerry.